On a hill above Norwich there was an oak tree. In the summer of 1549, 16,000 men camped around it and held court beneath it. And for 6 weeks the second city of England was governed from that tree by a tanner. 3,000 of them would be dead before the harvest, and 16 years later the same city wrote to the Queen of England and asked her permission to fill itself with foreigners. The images in this film are AI-assisted reconstructions, attempts to make visible a city that burned, starved and rebuilt itself so many times that much of it exists now only in records. Small imperfections may appear, but they let us walk through a Norwich that no longer stands. 500 years, one cloth, and a city that grew rich on it and then turned on itself. A city that burned its own cathedral over a toll on a fair. That lost 3/4 of its people in a single year. That crushed a rebellion of its own countrymen on the heath above its walls. And that saved itself in the end by opening its gates to 300 refugees who did not speak its language. It begins with wool and with a village almost nobody has heard of. The village is called Worstead, 12 miles northeast of Norwich. In the 13th century, the weavers there perfected a way of combing long wool fibres and spinning them tight, producing a cloth that was smooth, strong and light where the ordinary woolens of England were thick and shaggy. It took the village's name, Worstead. Norfolk had the sheep, the water and the ports. Edward I encouraged the trade and opened the European markets to it. And Norwich, sitting at the centre of the county on a navigable river, became the place where the cloth was sold, dyed, finished and shipped. Everything that follows comes from that one fact. By the middle of the 13th century, the city was rich enough to be dangerous to live in. The wealth was not evenly held. The cathedral priory owned a great enclosed precinct in the heart of the city, and the prior held the right to charge tolls on every sale made at the Trinity Fair, held each year at Tumbland, just outside his gates. On the 12th of June 1272, at that fair, an argument over those tolls turned into a fight, and a citizen was killed by a crossbow bolt. What followed took weeks. The prior excommunicated the citizens, closed the gates of the precinct, and sent to Yarmouth for mercenaries to hold his walls. Through the rest of that summer his men raided a tavern and a house in the city, and shot crossbow bolts from the precinct at people passing in the street. Then the citizens answered. They climbed the tower of St. George Tombland, the parish church that stands directly over the close, and shot burning arrows across the wall. The riot lasted 3 days. Monks were killed. The cloisters, the monastery library and part of the cathedral itself burned. When the king came, he found for the priory. The city was fined an enormous sum and made to send a man to Rome to beg the Pope's pardon, and some 30 of its citizens were condemned to death. Some were hanged. Others were dragged behind horses through the streets of Norwich until they died. 20 years later, Norwich began to build its walls. They took from 1294 to 1343 to finish. 4 kilometres of flint, around 40 towers and 12 gates. They ran longer than the walls of London. Standing on Mousehold Heath and looking down, a traveller would have seen a walled city of spires, the cathedral rising out of the middle of it, and the river running through. Inside those walls, at the height of it, stood 57 parish churches. Then, on the first day of January 1349, the plague came up the road from the south coast. The numbers are hard to hold in the mind. Norwich may have had 25,000 people in 1348. 20 years later, as few as 6,000 were still living in the city. 2/3 of the clergy died. The following year, only one market stall in 3 was occupied. The dead went into communal pits in the cathedral close. In the ground, the citizens had fought the monks over 77 years before. Out of that century came the strangest voice in English literature. In 1373, a woman living in a cell built against the wall of a small church in the city fell gravely ill and received a series of visions. She wrote them down. We do not know her name. She's called Julian, after the church. She's the first woman known to have written a book in English. And what she wrote in a city that had just buried 3/4 of itself was that all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. The city recovered because the cloth recovered. Weavers came in from the ruined villages, the looms started again, and by the 15th century Norwich was once more the second city of the kingdom. Its wealth built on a fabric named after a hamlet. But the wool that made the city was changing the country around it. Cloth needs sheep, and sheep need pasture. Across Norfolk, land that had been open field and common grazing was being fenced in by landowners and turned over to flocks. Fewer hands were needed. Villages that had fed themselves for centuries lost the ground they fed themselves from. The wealth flowing into Norwich was being made out of the countryside's floor. In July 1549, that floor gave way. It began at Wymondham, at the town feast, with men going out into the fields to pull down the fences of a landowner named John Flowerdew. Flowerdew was widely hated, and he was also quick. He paid the crowd to leave his hedges alone and go and break those of his neighbour instead. The neighbour was Robert Kett, a yeoman farmer and tanner of the town. When the crowd arrived at his fences, Kett did something nobody had bought and nobody expected. He agreed with them. He helped them tear down his own hedges, and then he offered to lead them. On the 9th of July they marched on Norwich. Within days the camp on Mousehold Heath, the high ground northeast of the city, had swollen to 16,000 men. This was not a mob. Kett set up a governing council on the heath, with representatives from the Norfolk hundreds, and it sat in the open under an oak that the rebels named the Oak of Reformation. They issued warrants, requisitioned supplies and tried cases, and they drew up 29 articles and sent them to the Lord Protector in London. The articles are the reason this rebellion still matters. They asked that landlords be stopped from grazing their flocks on common land. They asked that rents be held, and they asked something no one had thought to write down before, that where a priest was unable or unwilling to teach, the parishioners should have the right to choose another. At the end of July they took the city. London sent the Marquess of Northampton with 1,400 men. In the street fighting that followed, one of his commanders, Lord Sheffield, was pulled from his horse and killed, and the royal army withdrew from Norwich altogether. For 6 weeks a tanner from Wymondham held England's second city. Then the government sent the Earl of Warwick, and Warwick did not come to negotiate. On the 26th of August 1,000 foreign mercenaries reached him. The next day the rebels came down from the heath into a shallow valley the records call Dussindale, and Warwick's cavalry rode into them. Between 3,000 and 4,000 rebels were killed. Warwick lost around 350 men. 49 of the survivors were hanged in Norwich. Robert Kett was taken to London, tried for treason, and brought back. On the 7th of December 1549 he was hanged from the walls of Norwich Castle and left there in chains, in sight of the city. His brother William was hanged from the steeple of Wymondham Church. The city had helped destroy an army raised from its own fields, and it had not noticed that its trade was already going. Between 1535 and 1561 the Norwich cloth trade fell away sharply. The heavy worsteds the city had made for 3 centuries were being beaten in every European market by lighter, cheaper fabrics from the Low Countries, called the new draperies. Norwich knew how to make one kind of cloth extremely well, and the world had stopped wanting it. In 1565 the mayor, Thomas Southerton, put a proposal to his aldermen that ought to have been impossible. Across the North Sea the Protestant weavers of Flanders and Wallonia were being hunted by the Spanish. Southerton proposed that Norwich invite them, not tolerate them, not permit them, invite them by name, and give them the freedom of the city to work. Letters patent came from Elizabeth. On the 1st of June 1566, Southerton set his seal to an order naming 30 master textile workers and their households, 24 Dutch families, 6 Walloon, perhaps 300 people in all. In 1565 they were less than 1% of the population of Norwich. By 1582 they were more than a third of it. At their height they were something close to 40%, and the city they had come to had changed shape around them. They brought the very fabrics that had been beating Norwich, the seize, the baize, the light new draperies. They brought their own church, in the choir of the old Blackfriars where services were held in Dutch. They brought printing. They brought their gardens and their flowers, and they brought small yellow birds from the Canary Islands, which they bred in cages hung in the weaving lofts. Norwich called them the Strangers, and it kept the word without malice. The house that carries their name still stands. So by the end of the 17th century stand at the top of Mousehold Heath and look down at what this cloth had built. 57 churches inside 4 kilometres of flint, a cathedral its own citizens had once set fire to, a castle from whose walls a tanner had been hanged in chains, and below, in the lanes running down to the river, looms working in 2 languages. The city had spent 500 years fighting the people who fed it, and then it had been saved by strangers it went out and asked for.